follow-up email with the session so you can share it with your teammates or you can watch it again at your convenience. Today's webinar is going to be an advanced introduction to priority matrix. So I'm hoping that all of you have had the chance to attend or watch one of my pre-recorded, more so basic introductions. So then hopefully you kind of have the foundational understanding of kind of how priority matrix works. And so today we're going to dig deeper into all the more advanced features that, there's just not time to go over during kind of the basic intro. So that's what we'll be working on today. So with all of that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. This is actually the first time that I'm going to be doing the advanced introduction to priority matrix. So I can't say exactly how long I expect it to take. Typically, if this is your first webinar, they usually go about 30 to 40 minutes, kind of depending on the questions that we have. So that's kind of the time frame that you can budget for. So at this point, you should be able to see my screen. Hopefully you can hear me okay. And lastly, I always like to say that if you can't hear me or you're not able to see my screen or you think there's maybe some technical glitches going on, just let me know. Again, I'm always keeping an eye on the chat and I'm happy to kind of be conscious of what's going on there. Okay, so I'm really excited to get into this today. So this is the advanced introduction to priority matrix. So a little bit of a recap for those of you that have or maybe have not attended my basic introduction to priority matrix. If you haven't and you're thinking, hey, that's actually something that would be helpful for me, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, I have another live basic intro happening. So register for that. Even if you can't make it, I'll send you that follow-up email with the recorded session. During the more so kind of basic introduction to priority matrix, we go over kind of the general foundational thinking of what priority matrix offers. We touch on the concept of sharing projects and task level collaboration, like file sharing, setting deadlines, progress updates, and effort hours. We also touch on the things like alerts and notifications, where to find those in the application, where to find those in different places in Teams. I typically have time to go over the email management aspect, which is the Office 365 integration. Today, we're going to take an even closer look at that. And then during the intro webinar, I usually go over the one-on-one view, which is specifically designed for meeting management. So hopefully for those of you who have attended the webinar, you're thinking, yeah, this sounds about right. I definitely remember all of that. And again, if this is something that you feel like you're kind of lacking knowledge on, no problem. Just join the webinar tomorrow and we'll kind of get you all caught up. So that's what your basic introduction is going to be looking like. Today, I want to take some time to kind of dive into the more advanced features. What do these include? These things can look like the productivity insight reports that are going to be automatically generated inside the application for you. We have a workload management report, which is incredibly helpful for those teams and those managers who need a better understanding of what's on each person's plate, who's overloaded, who can take on more projects and more tasks, just kind of making sure that priorities are delegated appropriately. We're going to take a look at project planning with dependencies in the priority matrix Gantt chart. Sometimes I get the chance to kind of show that in the introduction, but I never get the chance to really get in and actually walk you through the functionalities there. So I'm super excited about that. We're going to look at the automated meeting agenda for those of you that use Microsoft Teams meetings, and also the follow-up email that we call the meeting minutes. And lastly, I'm going to show you some more best practices with the Outlook 365 integration. So there's about 5 bullet points there. And in my opinion, those are some of the more advanced features that are super supportive for people, especially if they're using priority matrix with a team. And so again, I'm super excited to be able to share that all with you today. I'm going to go over a couple slides here that just kind of give you kind of a visual understanding of what we're going to be looking at during the live demo. But keep in mind, everything that I show you in the next 4 slides here is just a preview. I'm going to walk you through the actual interactive reports and everything like that in the live demo. So here we have a snapshot of our workload management report, basically breaking it down per user, per day, how many items are going to be due. Our smart meeting agenda, or rather called Agenda by Priority Matrix, is an add-on that you can add to your Microsoft Teams meetings to automatically create each person's meeting agenda and then follow up with that meeting minute email. The Gantt chart dependencies, incredibly helpful for kind of that project planning aspect, making sure that there's not any unknown barriers that can delay the entire project. I'm going to show you all the different relationships that you can actually set up in Priority Matrix. And lastly, we are going to look at the email management aspect and take a closer look at the Outlook 365 integration. Just kind of one last comment here for those of you that joined a little bit later. Questions are very much encouraged. So during the live demo portion of this, if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, definitely jump in. I would love to hear those so I can kind of direct the presentation in a way that's going to be effective for all of you. So with all that being said, let's kind of switch gears, and we can expect, I think, this demo portion to last maybe like 15 to 20 minutes or so, probably closer to 15, just because it is a little bit shorter than kind of the standard introduction. But let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you that are first seeing Priority Matrix for the very first time today, I want to help you understand that a lot of our users do, in fact, utilize the Microsoft Teams integration, which is fully functional. You're not going to face any limitations through this add-in. So if you are indeed involved in the Office 365 environment, just go to your apps, download Priority Matrix, and then pin it open to a toolbar so it always stays there and is super easily accessible for you all. For those of you that like to follow along with me, which is always kind of cool to do because then you can get a feel of the application as I kind of teach you all of this, open the Priority Matrix app through Teams, click on My Projects, and then click on the 4-quadrant icon up here in the top left corner. So for all of us on this webinar today, I want us to understand that the idea of Priority Matrix is to create this central system where we're able to work together with our teammates to, number one, align priorities, number two, very easily share progress updates, whether it's sharing those with your teammates, or maybe you're sharing these project updates with several layers of management. There's a lot of different use cases out there with Priority Matrix, but at the end of the day, no matter who you're using it with, it's designed to be this one central spot where you're basically able to do anything relating to team collaboration and project and task management. So let's see here. I'm trying to think of the best way to kind of go about this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up one of these projects. And again, for those of you that are just now seeing Priority Matrix for the first time, these projects represent kind of a group of similar priorities that you're going to be working on with your teammates. So you're able to share this project with your teammates, giving them full access and visibility into this system. So the first thing that I'm going to be showing you all in terms of kind of advanced features is the automatically created Gantt chart and the dependencies that we can set up as well. So here in the top right corner, you'll see that there's a couple different views to see your data. First and foremost, we have kind of the standard quadrant view, which is designed to help you and your teammates make sure that your priorities are in fact aligned. You guys are working on things that matter the most and postponing the lower priorities. When I jump to this guy, just one jump over, this is going to be my list format. Again, automatically created and filtered based off of your deadlines. So it makes it super easy to see upcoming due dates. And here you can check in on the progress completed to make sure that it's not actually slipping through the cracks. One jump over is going to be your automatically created calendar. And this is where I kind of want to land on where we're going to be spending the next couple minutes looking, which is in fact the Priority Matrix Gantt chart. So you will notice that when I clicked on the Gantt chart view, this was automatically created. I can admit I don't know a whole lot about Microsoft Project at this point, but what I do know is that a lot of project managers and users find Microsoft Project because they want some sort of Gantt charting system. And what I've heard is that the priority matrix Gantt chart is kind of a good supplement for Microsoft Project if you're not ready to dive into that solution entirely. So here's our Gantt chart, again, automatically generated based off of the start date and the due date that you plug in to that item. So what we can do is I'm actually going to add a new item and we can just kind of go through this together. So we'll just say new action item for webinar. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a date. So we'll go in here and we'll select our due date and we'll hit OK. So basically what happens is in order for this to really show up on the Gantt chart in a way that makes sense, I like to encourage people to put a start date and a due date because that's going to kind of walk you through like the duration of the action item and help you kind of line it up with the other priorities that are happening in this project. So here we are, it just jumped up to the top. And again, we can very easily see the time frame of how long this priority is taking. Keep an eye on this, and I'm going to update the progress, which you'll see actually changes that purple bar there. So again, at a glance, we understand like, hey, this deadline's coming up and it looks like it's, over halfway done. So just kind of a cool feature there. But the next concept with using dependencies in a Gantt chart is to effectively set up your project to ensure that you're not going to run into any unforeseen barriers that will delay the entire schedule of this project. So what you're able to do is you can essentially set up relationships between these priorities. In Priority Matrix, the way to do that is you'll jump over to the item details and we're going to click on resources. Next up, we're going to say link item. Automatically, it says you can choose your relationship. So just for sake of this example, I'm going to say this new action item for webinar, it's going to block the resource allocation item. No rhyme or reason why you choose that. It's just going to be a clear example for the webinar today. So we are saying this new action item is blocking resource allocation. So now you can see it's been added as a relationship in the Gantt chart. And momentarily, if you keep an eye up here, a new little arrow will be formed, basically linking these items together. If you made a mistake, and I know that I sure did when I was just getting familiar with setting up these dependencies, you can always go back and you can modify it if needed. So we'll give that a minute to load, but in the meantime, you can see some of these previously created dependencies that I set up. When I move these, it moves all the attached ones. So here's the example we just created. If I drag this over, the way that I set up these relationships is it's basically step by step. So one thing gets delayed, the first item, everything behind it's also getting delayed. This is a super clear way to say, okay, teammates, here we're in this team meeting and resource allocation has been delayed. What happens is this bumps the entire project back. And to kind of, piggyback on this idea of project planning, if you're working with stakeholders to ensure a timeline is met and you guys are planning out the duration of the project together, you can always share this project in read-only mode. And in fact, what happens is you can copy this, you can email it to them, and then your stakeholders will in fact be able to see the Gantt chart that you've created. Read-only means they can't actually make any changes, but it's sure a great way to say, okay, all my stakeholders on this project, here's the timeline we're working on. And then if for whatever reason something is delayed, if you bump it back, their read-only view in that project will also be modified. Hopefully that's pretty clear. I've been told that our Gantt chart is very simple to use compared to other solutions, which is fantastic feedback. And I've also seen a lot of people really successfully set up the dependencies to, again, kind of help with that project planning. Happy to answer any questions that might be kind of surfacing about the dependencies. But again, I hope that that is pretty helpful for you all. One small feature I would add is that if I move, for example, resource allocation, if I move it, let's say all the way to July, pretty drastic change, you'll see that my start date and my due date are also automatically updated. So it's all communicating, all working together, all kind of going hand in hand to make this automatically created Gantt chart with dependencies. Okay, so that is the Gantt chart there. And I'm going to kind of bounce around here again because this isn't just kind of the standard introduction webinar. It's a little more all over the place because I'm making a point to kind of jump to the more advanced features. So the next thing I want to show you is the concept of reporting. When I talk to leaders in organizations or, really anybody for that matter, a lot of the times I hear, yeah, I have to spend several hours every week or, dozens of hours monthly generating reports so our management knows what we're working on, what's been completed, what's up next, what each person is working on. And when you use priority matrix, that weight can be lifted off your shoulders because everything you put into the system is rolled up into automatically generated reports for you. So again, for those of you following along, I went to the 4 lines in the top left corner and then I clicked on general reports. My favorite report is workload management, which I'll get to next. But I'm going to open up, again, this automatically created report. You can see when it was generated, which is really cool. I'm going to open up your last 7 days. So what happens now is, again, the system is looking across all of the projects that I have access to. In terms of privacy, if let's say my engineers have 20 projects that they haven't shared with me, that's of course not going to show up on my report. So it's still kind of keeping that promise of privacy, only showing you what's actually in the projects you have access to. With that being said, for those of you who are looking at this as an enterprise solution, we can in fact make you what's called a super admin as long as we have permission from everybody who's using it. And in that case, like the owner of the company or the person doing all these reports can by default get access to every single project. So the reports are in fact more accurate. That's kind of a rare circumstance and we only do that by request. So taking a look at these reports, if we continue to scroll down, you'll be able to see item status by tag. So we can see the most active tags basically for the last 7 days. Keep scrolling down. We have kind of this map here, which helps you understand how many items have been completed, created, open, and are new over the past 7 days. Keeping in mind, everything is interactive. So if I ever wonder, okay, well, what's this, big bar of new items? Click on it. It's going to break down everything that it's referencing there. Scrolling down a little bit further, one of the newer reports that we recently added, I believe it was just yesterday, is breaking it down on a per user basis in this project to help you understand the activity for that specific person. So here I can see that I have completed 5 items in the last 7 days, and we can see when it was completed on. Kind of so on and so forth. So again, all of this is interactive, and it's a great way to understand the activity for your teammates and make sure that everybody's on track. I think, Lynn, you may be unmuted, not to call you out, but just so you don't cause any background noise there. And I can actually, okay, thank you. I was going to say I can mute you if needed, but it looks like you took care of that, so thank you. Okay, so again, these are called our productivity insight reports. They're going to be available for you on your trial and with our business and enterprise licenses. If you have any questions about these reports, hey, can I do this? How do I access this data? Just email me or ask at the very end. These reports are super in depth. And in fact, For our enterprise users, we oftentimes generate custom reports. Of course, to an extent, it can't be something way too crazy, but we are able to customize these if you're not able to find what you're looking for. So now I really get to kind of nerd out because I'm obsessed with this workload management report, mostly because of how useful I've seen it being for a lot of our organizations that are using Priority Matrix. And a little bit of backstory, how this report came to be, it's kind of an interesting story. We were working with one of the largest news outlets in, I think it was somewhere in the Middle East. I want to say it was Saudi Arabia, which is crazy to be able to connect with people all the way over there. But they had about 400 employees. They had just gone remote and they connected with us and said, we need a way to understand that all of our employees have an even workload balance. We're not overloading or underloading people. And of course, for all of us working remote, if you don't have a system in place, it's literally impossible to get that view. So this report was initially created for them, and then we made it available for everybody else to use because it's so helpful. But let's look at myself here. This is a good example. You can basically see that it breaks down every single person who's on my priority matrix team. You're able to choose the time frame here. So you can go back or you can go into the future and see what's kind of on your plate for the next few weeks. And then you can decide the mode. For me, a number of items makes the most sense because I work off of deadlines. A lot of our organizations use effort and scheduled hours as well, which is great. But again, for this example, we'll use number of items. I think that resonates with a lot of people. Super easy to get these numbers because all you have to do is just plug in a due date and then it shows up on here. So let's look at Friday, for example. Apparently I have 7 items due that day. So from an up high perspective, my manager can now see, my workload compared to other people's. Not the best example because this is just a demo account, but you can kind of get the idea of what it would look like. And if they have the bandwidth, they can click on this number 7 and see, okay, here's all the 7 things that Erica has due on Friday. So again, this is going to be your workload management report. You can also modify who you can see in this report. If you have user groups set up, maybe you have a sales team, HR, customer success, whatever it is, you can also filter by user group to quickly see the workload management. You can export all of these reports to a CSV as well, which is kind of a common question that comes up, so figured I would add that in. Hopefully you all love the workload management report as much as I do. It's very interactive, super easy to use, and the best part is that it's actually all automatically generated. Okay, so now to my other favorite advanced feature. And as you guys can probably all tell, I'm super pumped to show you all of this because these are the kinds of things that, in a 20-minute, 25-minute discovery meeting or training session, oftentimes I don't get to show all of this. And to me, it's some of the coolest stuff that we have. So I'm really happy that I have the chance to show this to a group of you today. And I hope that it is helpful. So kind of shifting gears here, what we're going to be looking at is how does Priority Matrix play a role for group meetings? And, one of the biggest things I hear every single day is we need to have shorter and more effective team meetings because they're basically draining our days. So what you'll be able to do, and I have a little example set up here, for those of you that create your meetings through Microsoft Teams or side note through Outlook using the Teams add-in in Outlook, you can do the same thing in both places. But what you'll do is go ahead and create a Teams meeting and definitely pay attention to the fact that you have to add at least one person to test out this feature. So add one person and then send the meeting invite. And then what you can do is you're going to click on this plus icon to add a tab. I already have my tab added, but just search for Priority Matrix and then you'll be able to add this tab. So you're going to see automatically, again, I'm not doing any manual work here. The system is picking out Pablo's items and my items. And these items are those that have been recently modified and also have upcoming deadlines. So the system is saying, hey, for you and Pablo, here's the things that, our artificial intelligence thinks most likely are going to be discussing during this meeting. If for whatever reason the items are not, excuse me, oh, sounds like I'm getting a little cold here, but that's okay. If for whatever reason these items are not what you're looking for, or you feel like there's a couple items missing, that's no problem at all, because on the right-hand side, you have access to basically this bank of all of your priority matrix items. So I can go in here and I can say, okay, we need to talk about this one, Pablo and I need to talk about this, and then we're good to go. I can also actively create new action items. So one thing that I really want to be clear about here is this is all syncing and communicating with my priority matrix. So I'm not just pulling these items out of nowhere. I'm not just creating random notes. They're being prioritized and syncing back to my PM. When I click join, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to mess up our webinar today, but you can imagine if you're looking at our meeting that we have open today, and then you're using this agenda on the right hand side panel where you can typically see like the chat or the participants, right next to that, you would see this priority matrix agenda. It doesn't stop there. This is fully interactive during your meeting. So if I'm talking to Pablo and I say, okay, this item's finished, and this one's finished, again, it's syncing back to my priority matrix, and I can actively create new action items. So a piece of feedback that I typically hear from managers is the idea of, hey, we have these effective meetings, but we don't really have a way to track the new ideas we talk about and prioritize them and make sure they're not being forgotten about. So when you're able to actively do this through agenda by priority matrix, it takes that worry away and it helps people really remember everything that was discussed on that meeting. Last but not least, after the meeting ends, everybody in this meeting is going to receive a follow-up email automatically tracking your meeting minutes, tracking all the changes that were made and the new action items that were created, linking them back to your priority matrix to expand it for more context. So if this isn't the meeting support that you need as a team, then I don't really know what would be. And I kind of say that jokingly, but if you're looking at this and you're like, hey, could we add this, or can the system do it this way? Please let us know. This feature isn't maybe like a year or so old, maybe a year and a half. So we're definitely still improving it. We're hearing feedback every single day. And meeting management is such an interesting concept because it's such a pain point for a lot of people, especially what I found is that follow-up email tracking all the changes, and it's standardized. Everybody's going to be getting the same follow-up. It can be really helpful to take out kind of that manual aspect of it. All right, so I'm going to close that. Perfect. So last but definitely not least, and then we'll, I think, be able to open this up for more questions, is kind of the email management aspect of this. So let's go, let me go find a good example here. We'll use this guy. So in terms of email management, Priority Matrix has definitely kind of taken a big leap here and been able to assist a lot of people with keeping track of their important emails. So for those of you that have attended any of my other webinars, you're likely familiar kind of with how this works, but the idea is to take an email, you can prioritize it into the correct project, choosing the right quadrant, delegating it if you need to, picking your due date so it doesn't slip through the cracks, and then you can create the action item. I went through that very quickly again because I'll show that step more so in kind of the basic intro, because what I wanted to show you is the idea of not necessarily creating a new action item, but giving you the option to link this email to a pre-existing task that you already have. So this actually just happened to me this morning. I was working on a customer ticket with Pablo, who we see here. He's our CTO and co-founder. And then that user sent me an email with an update. So what I did is I went to my Outlook and I found that pre-existing task for that customer and I attached that email. So then Pablo could see that email. He could see their explanation, see the attachments that they shared with us. And it's all linked together, keeping it really well organized. Most importantly, I'm staying out of my inbox. So I didn't have to forward that email to anybody. I didn't have to cross my fingers that I remember about it to follow up. Put it in my PM. Pablo could then see it. I set my deadline and we could talk about it in Priority Matrix. Lastly, if you're using Priority Matrix with your teammates, you can get contextual details here in the sense that you'll see where it says Office 365, you can choose a user on your team and the system will show you all of your shared emails between yourself and that person, just to kind of keep you up to date with the latest. So let me double check on my notes here. We did productivity insight reports, workload management, dependencies, the meeting agenda, and Outlook. So if that's not too much information, hopefully it's not. I know that, you know, these, like I said, these advanced features, I don't always get time to show them because they are a little bit more complex. But in my opinion, you know, it's some of the most important stuff that Priority Matrix offers. So hopefully that was kind of a helpful quick demo into how all of that works. I would love to kind of pause here and ask questions. So Shelly, let's see. I did see your comment. You mentioned meeting minutes. So let me see if I can find a follow-up email example in my inbox from my meeting minutes from my meetings. But yes, basically what happens is when you use the Priority Matrix agenda or agenda by Priority Matrix, the system automatically follows up with you to track all of the changes that have happened during that meeting. And a lot of people reference those and call those meeting minutes. So that's what we called our emails. I'm looking for an example here. An example email to show you all. I don't know if I can find one, but in my follow-up email to everybody, I can take a little screenshot of what that email format will look like for you. Salvador, I see your question. To utilize the Priority Matrix meeting feature, does everyone need to have license? Does everyone need to have a license to access? So the answer is kind of yes and no, because we've seen the meeting agenda by Priority Matrix meeting feature used with external collaborators as well to, again, just kind of help people stay on track and touch on all those super important action items that may be important for your stakeholders to be aware of. So in the sense of collaboration and being able to pull from your Priority Matrix kind of bank of priorities, in that sense, yes, you would need to have a Priority Matrix account to have all that collaboration. But again, on the other hand, if there's external collaborators that are joining that meeting with you, they will be able to see that agenda that you've preset, if that kind of makes sense. Yes, so yeah, external collaborators can see the agenda. And in fact, they will get that follow-up email with the meeting minutes, which is kind of cool because if you're in a meeting with those stakeholders and you guys talk about all the next steps for this project you're working on together, we want everybody to continue to be on the same page. So they will get that follow-up email saying, hey, here's X, Y, and Z that we discussed in the meeting. And, you know, here's when we're going to have it done.
Gotcha. And then is that a different license tier, right? Because I think it's there's like the Priority Matrix. There's like different licenses, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like the most I think the business one? Is that the one that has that
Yeah, great
okay.
question. So the Gantt chart and the reporting, those are part of the business and enterprise license. However, the agenda that we looked at in the calendar, that is actually part of the pro license. So you wouldn't necessarily need the full business license to access this.
Gotcha. Okay.
Does it seem like something that might be helpful for you, Salvador? Or are you kind of
Absolutely.
thinking about how you might use it?
No, yeah, absolutely. Because right now I have, I'm on calls like every day, right?
Hmm.
That's my life is just meetings, and I know I put agenda items in meeting notes, right? To
Hmm.
have something a little bit more, like as a check off kind of thing. You know what I mean? And you can create that in meeting notes as well, but I mean just to have it automatically just be there, just it's just I think it's a little bit more user friendly here, right? And everyone
Hmm.
can go in there do their thing, right? And it's yeah, I like how this is set up a little better. And it can be assigned to people, right? For this
Hmm.
agenda stuff. So yeah, over there I'm like creating, okay, I'm like typing out the agenda, or like
Right.
the action items, right? When they can just be clearly just, created here, right? So I think this is definitely a great feature. So that's why I was
Hmm.
kind of asking if this is you know, this is part of the separate lines, but because this is part of the pro, you said the pro, right? So that's one step
Yes.
of the business. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, Salvador. I'll follow up with you one on one. And if you want to kind of take a closer look at this together, just let me know. But yeah, I see a lot of people kind of doing this, this format for meetings, but a lot of the times it just goes into like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Doc, which, at the end of the day is just not really collaborative enough to
Mhm.
get, anything out of those priorities and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I was gonna start with. It was like, I know I need man, like I have too many managers. You have a lot of things going on.
Hmm.
A guy created an action items Excel sheet. I'm like, oh Lord, but then
Right. I know.
yeah,
Please, no
we
more
had
Excel
another Excel
sheets.
sheet. Yeah.
Right.
And then I was told about this. I'm like, ooh, this is way better, and it has all these other features. It's like it's just more automated in a sense where it's just
Mhm.
yeah. I'm glad this exists. That's all.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. I'm excited to hear how it goes for you. Any other questions? Let's see. So, Shelly, yes, I will send that follow-up email with the format of the meeting minutes. If I would have been better prepared, I would have had that ready to show all of you today, but I'll definitely get that put together for you. Let's see. Let's go back to my presentation and we can kind of look at this. So, a couple things I want to share before people start dropping off is in April, I think I have 15 more webinars scheduled, and we're doing a really cool one, which is kind of like a Ask Me Anything fireside chat event. And what happens there is that basically people from the Priority Matrix community just join and we ask questions, we share our use cases, and we just kind of learn from like-minded people and see how our use case can, be benefited from basically their advice and vice versa. So it's really fun. We have an hour blocked off, and last week it definitely lasted a full hour. It was just kind of an open conversation. So that will be hosted on April 9th at sometime in the afternoon. I think it's 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And if you can, definitely join it. It's a really cool experience. Can we share this webinar with our senior leadership? Yes, Shelly, I will. This is being recorded and I'm going to send it to all of you right when it ends. But with that being said, I definitely understand that this webinar is kind of long. So if there's anything in here, maybe it's the meeting agendas or maybe it's the email management aspect. And basically all of these functions here I've made more condensed videos about as well. So those are all accessible on our YouTube page. Or Shelly, specifically for you, if you have something in mind that I can send you, just let me know and I can pick those resources out for you. Awesome. Well, if that is it for questions, again, I hope that this was coherent because it was my first time doing the advanced one. But as I said 100 times, I was super excited to be able to share this with you all, and I do plan to continue doing it, at least once a week. I want to do the intro and the advanced session. And as more features come out and we continue to add more advanced functionalities to PM, the webinar will constantly be changing and updating to kind of share those new functionalities. So thank you again for your time. That follow-up email is going